In this talk, we will learn about the different organs found in vascular plants. Similar to animals, plants show different levels of organization. All plants are made up of cells. The cells then come together to form tissues. The tissues then come together to give rise to organs like leaves or roots. Different organs come together to form an organ system like the shoot system or the root system. And finally, the organ systems work together to form the organism, which is the plant. The root and shoot system of plants are made up of organs. There are three main organs of plants. The roots, which are part of the root system, absorb water and minerals, while stems, which are present above the ground, usually connect the roots to other parts of the plant. Within the stems, right at the top, there is the apical bud that allows the plant to grow in height. There are nodes on the stems from where branches and leaves can arise. At the base of the nodes, there's usually an auxiliary bud that allows the formation of branches. Between two nodes is the internode. The third organ of plants are the leaves. The leaves perform photosynthesis, which allows the plant to make organic compounds from inorganic carbon dioxide. They can also form reproductive structures. Many different parts of cones and flowers are actually modified leaves that help in reproduction. Roots are organs that are present below the ground and hence help in anchoring the plant. They also absorb water and minerals from the soil, and some roots have the ability to store carbohydrates. To do so, they must first obtain the sugars from shoots in order to store them. The roots of almost all plants form mycorrhizal associations, which are symbiotic relationships with certain types of fungi. This helps the root in order to obtain water in a more effective manner. The first root that emerges is called as the primary root. The primary root can then give rise to branches called as lateral roots. These lateral roots improve anchorage as well as water absorption because there is an increase in the surface area. The different tissues found in roots include the outer dermal tissue, which forms the epidermis. The epidermis of roots lacks the cuticle, which is a waxy substance that prevents water loss. They're usually found in the epidermis of stem and leaves, but not in roots. The epidermis cells do form root hairs that allows better absorption of water. In addition to dermal tissue, vascular tissues are also found in roots. The vascular tissues are usually found in the form of vascular bundles. These vascular bundles include phloem that is present on the outer side and xylem that is present in the more interior end. This bundle of vascular tissue is also called as the stele in vascular plants. Between the dermal and the vascular tissues, we can find the ground tissue. The ground tissue is sometimes also called as the cortex. In the roots of monocots, there is layers of ground tissue present within the vascular bundle. This layer of ground tissue is called as the pith. The root can be divided into four main regions. At the tip of the root is the root cap, which protects the root apical meristem. The zone of cell division is where the root apical meristem is present. The root apical meristem is the stem cells of the plant, which allows the root to undergo primary growth, which is where it increases in length. The zone of cell division is where there is rapid cell division occurring in order for the root to grow. The zone of elongation is where the cells become longer and start the process of differentiation. The zone of maturation, which is also called as the zone of differentiation, is where these elongated cells differentiate to form more specialized cells. In addition to primary growth, the roots of many gymnosperms and some angiosperms like eudicots show secondary growth. This secondary growth is needed to provide support as it increases the thickness of the root. When we look at the root, the tip of the root is usually slender and thin, but as we go more and more up, it increases in its girth and hence becomes thicker. This secondary growth is mediated by lateral meristems. The lateral meristems that are found in roots include the vascular cambium as well as the cork cambium. The primary root goes through different changes in order to support secondary growth. In order to form secondary vascular tissues, a vascular cambium is formed. The vascular cambium is sandwiched between the primary xylem and the primary phloem. As secondary growth begins, the primary xylem is surrounded by the secondary xylem that arises from the vascular cambium. Similarly, secondary phloem surrounds the primary phloem and also arises from the vascular cambium. In addition to the vascular cambium, we also have the cork cambium. The cork cambium replaces the epidermis, which is usually a single layer of cells, into a multiple layer of the periderm. The periderm includes the cork and the cork cambium. There are different types of roots that are observed in plants. A taproot is where there is a main primary root that branches to form lateral roots. Taproots provide better support to the plant and are commonly observed in gymnosperms as well as eudicots. A fibrous root, on the other hand, is a root where there are many roots that have a similar diameter. Hence, there is no primary root that tends to be thicker from other roots. Fibrous roots are commonly observed in monocots. A third type of root is the adventitious root. Adventitious roots arise from any place other than the actual plant's root. Hence, they can arise from stems, leaves, or other parts. In some plants, modified roots are formed that perform other functions in addition to absorbing water and minerals. Prop roots are adventitious roots that develop from stems and branches, and they extend into the soil in order to support the plant. Prop roots are commonly found in crops like maize, as well as in trees like the ficus tree. It helps keep the plant upright because the normal roots are not strong enough to support the plant. Aerial roots are roots that are not underground, but they're able to obtain water from the air. Aerial roots are commonly seen in orchids, which are usually present in tropical climates, and they tend to grow on other trees, and hence they use their aerial roots in order to obtain water from the air. Pneumatophores are modified roots found in plants like mangroves that live in swamps. The pneumatophores extend out of the water to facilitate the uptake of oxygen, since the muddy soil in which the plant grows is poor in dissolved oxygen. Some roots can store carbohydrates like beetroots, carrots, etc. Buttress roots are large, wide roots which can be considered as aerial extensions of lateral surface roots. They stabilize trees and prevent them from toppling when these trees grow in nutrient-poor tropical forest soils. Thus, we can see that many plants have modified roots to serve other types of functions. The stem is an organ of the plant that grows above the ground and is part of the shoot system. Its main function is to elongate and orient the shoot to maximize photosynthesis. The stem is made of different parts, which includes the apical bud that houses the shoot apical meristem. The shoot apical meristem promotes primary growth and helps the plant gain height. The nodes are places where the leaves are attached. The region between two nodes is the internode. Where the leaf meets the node, we can find the auxiliary bud. The auxiliary bud can differentiate to form a lateral branch, a thorn, or a flower. It is usually kept dormant by the apical bud, and if the apical bud is cut off, the auxiliary bud can give rise to lateral branches. During the primary growth of the stem, the tissues that we can find include the dermal tissue, which forms the outermost layer. The dermal tissue is made up of epidermis cells that will secrete cutin that forms the cuticle. The cuticle prevents water loss from the stem. The dermal tissue can also have hair-like structures present. In addition to the dermal tissue, the vascular tissue is also present. The vascular tissue includes xylem and phloem, and they are present in the form of a vascular bundle. The vascular bundle can be arranged in the form as a ring in the stems of eudicots. In this ring, in each vascular bundle, the phloem is on the outer side while the xylem is on the inner side. In the case of monocots, the vascular bundles are scattered throughout the tissues. Between the dermal and vascular tissue is the ground tissue, which is mostly made up of parenchyma cells. It can also include collenchyma and sclerenchyma cells that provide support to the stem. In the case of eudicots, there is ground tissue inside the vascular bundle, and this ground tissue is called as the pith. There is ground tissue around the vascular bundle, which is called as the cortex. The stems of gymnosperms and some angiosperms, including the eudicots, show secondary growth. Secondary growth is normally not observed in monocots. The main purpose of secondary growth is to provide support. This is because the secondary growth results in an increase in the thickness of the stem. Secondary growth is promoted by lateral meristems. This includes the vascular cambium that promotes the secondary growth of vascular tissues, and the cork cambium that promotes changes to the dermal tissues. Sandwiched between the primary xylem and primary phloem is the vascular cambium. Thus, the vascular cambium can divide the primary xylem, which is on the inner side, and the primary phloem, which is on the outer side. During secondary growth, the secondary xylem is formed between the vascular cambium and the primary xylem. Similarly, secondary phloem is formed between the vascular cambium and the primary phloem. Thus, we are able to see that the secondary tissues are sandwiched between the primary xylem and the primary phloem. The cork cambium is surrounded by the epidermis. The cork cambium promotes cell division that results in the epidermal cells to be sloughed off and replaced by the periderm. The periderm can be multiple layers of cells around the tree trunk. The bark of a tree includes the periderm, the primary phloem, and the secondary phloem. The periderm has lenticels, which are openings that can promote gas exchange. Thus, following secondary growth, the layers of the stem, like the trunk of a tree, from the inside to out includes the pith, the primary xylem, the secondary phloem, the primary phloem, and finally the periderm. Secondary growth promotes the formation of tree rings, which can be seen on the trunks of trees. These rings can be used to estimate the age of the tree. Each ring normally represents 1 year of growth, and thus, by counting the number of tree rings, the age of the tree can be estimated. This is the basis of dendrochronology. The way some plants possess modified roots, we do have plants that possess modified stems. Bulbs, for example, are swollen underground stems that consist of fleshy leaves. An example of a bulb is an onion. Rhizomes are horizontal underground stems that give rise to adventitious roots. Many ferns show the presence of rhizomes. Tubers are the swollen tips of rhizomes. An example of tuber is a potato. Runners and stolons are horizontal stems that have long internodes that are present on the surface of the ground. Strawberry plants are very commonly known to show the presence of runners and stolons. Tendrils are flexible coil structures that twine around in order to give the plant some support. Now, while some tendrils are modified stems, we can also have other tendrils that are modified leaves. Cladophylls are flat photosynthetic stems and are normally seen in plants that live in arid environments where water is less. Many cacti show the presence of cladophylls. Leaves are the organs of the plant that are part of the shoot system. They are present above the ground and their primary function is photosynthesis. They can perform other functions as well, which includes exchange of gases, dissipation of heat, as well as defending the plant from predators. Leaves show determinate growth, which means that their growth stops after a certain stage. We usually call this stage as the stage of maturity. The different parts of a leaf include the petiole, which is the part of the leaf that attaches to the node of the stem, and the blade of the leaf, which is the surface of the leaf. Leaves are usually quite flat. Surrounding the shoot apical meristem, which is usually present at the apex of each stem, are the leaf primordia. Leaves develop from these leaf primordia. They can arrange themselves in different ways in plants, and this arrangement of leaves is called as phyllotaxy. Some common arrangements that are observed include the alternate arrangement, where we have one leaf at each node. In the spiral alternate arrangement, each leaf is at a different angle as well as plane than the previous one, while in the disticus alternate arrangement, each leaf is on the opposite side of the previous leaf. In the opposite arrangement, we can observe that there are two leaves at each node, but they are present on opposite sides of each other. The whorled arrangement involves multiple leaves at a node which are arranged in different planes. There are other types of arrangement, but these are some of the most common ones. Leaves can also be categorized as simple and compound. Simple leaves are those that have a single undivided blade, while compound leaves are those where the blade is completely divided into different parts and each part is called as a leaflet. There are three main tissues in the leaves. The outermost tissue is the dermal tissue. The dermal tissue is present on the lower side of the leaf as well as the upper side of the leaf. It is made up of epidermis cells and guard cells. The epidermis cells produce a waxy substance called as cutin that forms the cuticle. The cuticle protects the leaf. The epidermal cells may also have glands and trichomes, which are hair-like structures. The guard cells are cells of the dermal tissue that cover openings called as the stomata. There are two guard cells around every opening, and these cells are sausage-shaped. Stomata are more abundantly present on the lower epidermis, but we can also find some on the upper epidermis. The stomata play important roles in regulating gas exchange as well as water loss. In addition to dermal tissues, leaves also have vascular tissues, which are normally present in the veins of the leaf. The vascular tissues are continuous with the vascular tissues present in the stem. In the case of leaves, the veins can have different arrangements. In monocots, the veins can be parallel, while in eudicots, the veins can be branched. In the case of leaves, the vascular tissues are present in the form of a vascular bundle. They also act as the leaf's skeleton, and the vascular bundle comprises of xylem that transports water and phloem that transports sugars. Between the dermal and vascular tissue is the ground tissue. The ground tissue can be in the form of the bundle sheath cells, which are a layer of cells that cover the vascular bundle in the vein. The ground tissue can also be in the form of the mesophyll. In the case of monocots, there is one layer of the mesophyll, but in the case of dicots or eudicots, there are two layers of the mesophyll. The palisade mesophyll is the layer of mesophyll that is closer to the upper epidermis. This is where most photosynthesis of the leaf occurs. The spongy mesophyll is the layer of mesophyll that is closer to the lower epidermis. The spongy mesophyll can perform some photosynthesis, but its primary function is gas exchange and the exit of water vapor. The way some plants make modified roots and stems, leaves can be modified too. Flowers are examples of modified leaves that play important roles in sexual reproduction. Spines are also modified leaves that are observed in plants that live in areas where water is scarce. The spines reduce water loss and deter predators as well. Storage leaves are observed in plants like onions, where the leaves store sugars. Reproductive leaves can produce small plants called plantlets that are capable of growing independently into a full-sized plant. This is an example of vegetative reproduction or asexual reproduction that is observed in plants. Tendrils are modified leaves that can provide support to the plant. Some tendrils are modified stems, while others are modified leaves. Some plants can use their leaves to catch insects. Such insectivorous plants normally live in areas where there is poor availability of nitrogen, and hence they depend on insects to meet their nutritional requirements. With this, we come to the end of our talk, where we learned about the different organs present in plants, namely the roots, stems, and leaves. We learned about the functions of these organs, as well as their composition and different modifications that are shown by different plants.